glad I did this.
And that's why we wanted to point out that if there is a question you have or just a comment you would like to make, but you would feel more comfortable with that coming through the host, feel free to type a question in the chat box. Just make sure that you click the link instead of to everyone, that you would click to Andrea. I am controlling the PowerPoint, so it would be best to send the message directly to Andrea. It's difficult to see the chat box and control the PowerPoint at the same time. So for an anonymous question that you would like to make or comment, just send that to Andrea and she will chime in with our group, because we do want this to be an interactive workshop, and we've designed it in a way that we'll ask occasional questions, and if you're comfortable sharing and you want to, that is the perfect opportunity to do so. But by no means, is anyone going to be put on the spot, or do you have to do that? So with that, I'm going to share my screen and pull our workshop up. Can everyone see that? Mm-hmm. All right. So as Andrea mentioned, we've designed this workshop as just to really deepen our understanding of how the current life events impact our mental health and lead us to redefine our daily lives. And we certainly want to, we hope that you walk away with some strategies on how you can, strategies on how you can move forward during this time. So here's a couple of our goals. I'll let you look those over.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Ashley Hart. We're going to do some introductions, but as you're looking at this slide, our real goal for today is to understand in general just how the prolonged stress of 2020 has impacted or could impact our mental health. Identify key themes that we may be experiencing, and also identify things that maybe are outliers that you experience uniquely to your situation. It's always finding a balance between those two things. And then we want to provide specific action steps. I think we have a total of 8 that we'll go through, and that's going to be the meat of our presentation. Hopefully you'll find that to be very helpful. And then just looking forward and moving forward with strength, meaning, and purpose is our overarching goal for today.
So first, let's connect. As mentioned, I'm Nicole Johnson, and I'm the director of the Health Center at Cuesta College, and Dr. Ashley Hart, who is our licensed clinical psychologist. And with that, I would like to introduce our first activity, which is called A Rose and a Thorn. And I would like to start with Ashley, if you would feel comfortable sharing your rose and thorn, and maybe others will want to chime in.
Sure. Yeah, this is something that I do with my family often at the end of the day when we identify something that's going really great and identify something that's been really challenging. And when it comes to this pandemic, I think I keep going back to my engagement and involvement in my children's schooling. The rose is that we have created this beautiful cooperative Waldorf school among 5 families, and I'm more engaged than ever in my 4 and 6-year-old daughter's education. And the thorn is that it's very hard to do that when you're a working mother and hold the responsibility of other duties and roles. And so it's been very challenging to straddle both that rose and thorn. Yeah. Nope.
Do others would anyone else like to share a rose and a thorn in their life?
I'm happy to.
Great, thank you.
So it's pretty immediate. It's not overarching rose and thorn. So today we're passing out holiday baskets to our participants in the CalWorks Cafe, EOPS, and veterans programs. So the delight to see the families picking up the packages, and their gratitude and thanks has really been overwhelming. And my thorn is that I lost my keys. And so I was so consumed with trying to find my keys this morning. You know, it was just overwhelming. And I found them in my recycle bin in my office after looking everywhere for them. So
Really impressed that you found them.
I looked everywhere. I mean, I was everywhere I was yesterday. I was everywhere. It was just crazy. And then I was standing at my office door and I'm going, where have I not looked? And the trash was the only place I hadn't looked, and there they were. So that's my Rosenthorn.
Thank you.
For that.
That was great. Many of you are probably wondering what that picture on the screen is about, and I'll keep mine very brief, but similar to Ashley, obviously we've had a lot of time at home as a family beginning in March. And one of the ways that we were able to use that time in a fulfilling way for us is we are a foster family for kittens, and we have successfully helped care for and find homes for 16 kittens over the summer or since May. So that was my rose and thorn. Obviously, being home all the time and all of us under one roof comes with its own multiple thorns throughout the day and weeks and months, but it also has given us this time to do something that we really enjoy. Would anyone else like to share? Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And I can't see the chat box, so I will rely on a prompt from those of you who can, if anyone else does. If not, we'll just move forward.
Okay. With that, this slide titled Finding Light in Darkness is to take a moment to really acknowledge the seriousness of this last year or so with the pandemic and with the socio-political movement and how that's impacted all of us on varying levels and degrees. And you know, I think it's worth noting that some of us have been directly impacted by COVID, whether we've lost someone or we know, you know, of someone that's close to us that have lost people from COVID or who have been impacted by the different going-ons for the last year. And we want to just take a moment to say that we acknowledge that. That's why we're doing this presentation. We hope that it's helpful. And part of this presentation is to find the light in darkness and to identify ways we can move forward in difficult times. This quote here that says, "I never would have made it if I could not have laughed. It lifted me momentarily out of this horrible situation, just enough to make it livable," by Viktor Frankl from his famous text, Man's Search for Meaning. The reason why we've included that is that we have identified as one of the main coping mechanism is that we do have to find laughter and joy even in dark moments. And we've included a small snippet from the Adley show. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but it's funny. It's supposed to be funny, but we do want to preface it to make sure that people know that we are not trying to make fun or make light of this last year, but to have a laugh is important to our mental health. And so here it is.
I really don't understand why everybody isn't following the same rules right now. They're very clear, so let's take a minute and let's go over them again. First, you must not leave the house for any reason, unless of course you have a reason, and then you may leave the house. All stores are closed except those that are open, and all stores must close unless, of course, they need to stay open. This virus is deadly, but don't be afraid of it. It can only kill people who are vulnerable and also those who are not vulnerable. We should stay locked down until the virus stops infecting people. And it will only stop infecting people if enough of us get infected that we build immunity. So it is very important that we get infected and also do not get infected. You should not go to the doctor's office or the hospital unless you have to go there. Unless, of course, you are too sick to go there. This virus has no effect on children except for those children in which it affects. The virus remains active on different surfaces for 2 hours or 4 hours. or 6 hours, but in most cases it's days and not hours, and it needs a damp environment or a cold environment that is warm and dry in the air, unless the air is plastic. Schools are closed, so you need to
Okay, so we included that because we felt like it really captured how many mixed messages and how kind of crazy making it has been to get so much different information, and so stressful to feel like we can keep ourselves and others safe when we don't have a clear path and there are so many unknowns, which we'll talk more about later in the presentation of how to manage dealing with that uncertainty and how it impacts us. So throughout the year, we've experienced these ups and downs of, it's going to be okay, it's not going to be okay, and it's been very stressful. And our bodies are made to deal with stress. It's a part of our brain. The fight or flight mechanism in our brain is there to help us protect ourselves in times of high stress or threat. What we are not made to do is to endure chronic stress. And many of us, I think, were kind of tuned into that prior to the pandemic and 2020 in general, but it's been heightened with the pandemic. Of the level of stress is so chronic and so consistent. And so we go from our ability to just handle a situation where that part of our brain just kicks in and we're flooded with those stress hormones that allow us to take action when we need to straddling this vulnerable place that we're in when we're in chronic stress and we don't know exactly what to do. And we're going to touch on this when we go over those overarching themes, is that often that can bring up some really deep-rooted experiences and issues related to more existential experiences as humans.
Thank you. So one of the things that we wanted to point out is that idea of psychological diversity, and that, all humans can experience varying degrees of emotional and physical distress in difficult situations and in the same situation. So the response for one person may vary, but to another. And certainly we know that if you have a history of certain vulnerabilities, a history of trauma, perhaps, you could be impacted very differently from someone else. So we just want to acknowledge that that even though we're all experiencing this pandemic and the social injustices, it still looks different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, based on these unique biological and social background and how our lives have been. And then, there's so many, I want to point out, there's just so many systems not working right now. And we're all different in how we handle that. So for one person who really thrives on a routine and getting things done and having things organized and knowing what to expect, that could be very challenging compared to someone who, by nature has a more free-spirited or flexible, ideology. So we just want to acknowledge that we're all going through the same thing, but it still looks different.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. That goes to be said with the emotional roller coaster, that we're all going to experience different emotions. I've listed here some of the emotions that came to mind and that Nicole and I discussed when we created this workshop. But it's been really varied, and it's straddled between some pretty heavy, difficult emotions. And then there's also some positive emotions, and to create some space to think about how that impacts our mental health is important. So on one hand, we might experience fear, uncertainty, anger, hate, anxiety, sadness. There's loss and grief, loneliness, helplessness, shame. On the other hand, some of us have experienced relief from slowing our schedules down. Some of us have been really getting in touch with how grateful we are for what we have and what we've been able to create in this difficult situation. Hope, discovery. So really this topic is about how do we hold both, and how do we make space for all of those emotions. I'm wondering if anyone would like to add, either in the comments or chiming in, if there's some emotions missing there, if you would add, specifically what you've experienced or what you've seen others experience when it comes to dealing with 2020.
I'm just noticing that the difficult ones, it's a much longer list than the good ones.
It's quality, not quantity, right? One of the things that I've really noticed is within the community of San Luis Obispo, is how we've come together to offer supports for those, and maybe those that are experiencing, especially difficult times through this, whether it be, little food pantries coming up and being built all around, the community. To, I'm a part of some Facebook pages that offer help where you can just say what you need and people just chime in and say, oh, I've got that. I'll drop it off tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So generosity.
Yes, which we are actually going to talk a lot more about toward the end, on the importance of gratitude, and how that really helps our well-being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything that they would like to share, that maybe a feeling that they had that isn't recognized here, that someone else may be having too?
One of the things I've noticed for sure is being scatterbrained,
Mm-hmm.
right? So all of these emotions and all of this, you push down a lot of these emotions, and I see it coming up in that I'm not anywhere near as organized. I forget things more easily. Just the stress of all of it, it's wearing, right? It takes a toll.
Yeah. And, I would love to point out that reminds me of what this experience is like for the students. So trying to get through your class, and of course, when maybe others identify with that as well, and they feel less organized and their memory is impacted, that's just an additional challenge to making it through their class or through their semester.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Hunter. So with that being said, loss and grief has been a big part of this experience for a lot of people. And Nicole, I appreciate you bringing up the students. I think it's especially pertinent for the students, especially those within that 20 to 30-year-old age range, where losing the social connection, losing their first apartment, losing the routine of school and being in person has been really significant and impacted their mental health and their ability to perform academically. Loss and grief is a non-linear process, meaning you might experience something one day and something the next day, and then it kind of goes into this circular motion, instead of just going from, okay, this has happened and I don't want it to happen, all the way to acceptance and hope. No, we can kind of go back and forth between these different experiences, the 1 through 6.
And how many of us have had these different experiences even within the same day?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. So what makes it really difficult about, losing our routine, or not knowing what's going to happen with the pandemic, or seeing social injustice and not knowing, how it's going to be addressed. Is this something that psychologists and researchers call ambiguous loss, which is there's no certain event, there's no specific thing that happens, but there's this overall general feeling that the situation will not return to the way that it used to be. And I know I can relate to that when I think about my routine, or when I think about the way that my children kind of view the world, even that it's had a significant impact on the way we knew things to be prior and the way that they are now. Yeah.
And it seems like the way we knew things is getting farther and farther in the distance. So we're starting to forget the way it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Nicole, I can't hear you.
Oh,
Your reception has been a little spotty, I think. Okay. Are
Try
you
to
there?
turn off your video. It sometimes works if you turn your video off. Get better reception.
Mhm.
hold on one moment.
Oh, there, I heard that.
Yeah, I'm going to take that suggestion and stop my video and then reshare. When I'm
Okay.
in the, let's see if that improves.
Okay. Okay. I will,
Can you guys hear me better now?
yeah, we can.
Yep, definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Slide. Okay. I just wanted to point out what I was trying to say before, and thank you for pointing that out. That loss and grief, there's the obvious losses that someone might experience through this. And there's also, a host of small losses that accumulate and add up. And it can be the loss of a relationship, the loss of trust, the trust in our government, our freedoms with the social justice issues. So, there's so many things going on, and going through the grief process does not always involve something really obvious, like maybe a death in the family, but that it can be a lot of other things. So you might be feeling this loss and grief, and maybe you haven't been able to pinpoint what exactly it is that you're feeling or that you've lost, and just really be mindful of the fact that it's the small things as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. So we touched earlier in the presentation on these more existential experiences, and we're calling it, which many of you may be familiar with, the idea of the human condition, basically everything that humans experience, that run the gamut. And related to surviving 2020, these are the themes that popped out at us when we were reading and researching for the workshop. Identity, personal values, and priorities. Many of us have had to shift our priorities, and our values have had to shift to, what has been necessary for us to get through each day, each week, and so on. Meaning, making meaning out of these experiences is an essential part of coping with a difficult situation. If we can't make meaning from it, it can be very disorienting and overwhelming. Purpose, finding our purpose, as for me as a psychologist, in all the roles that we have in our life, as a mother, as a daughter, and so on, for each one of you in the presentation, thinking about, okay, what is my purpose? How can I proceed with things changing so much every day? Belonging, social support, authentic connection, and solidarity, knowing that we're not alone, feeling connected in times that we can potentially feel very isolated given stay-at-home orders and whatnot, not working, not going into the office every day. These kind of things really add up and contribute to how socially connected we feel. The bank of resiliency. So the idea that human beings are very resilient, but we have to build a bank of resiliency. We don't just get to be resilient anytime we want to be. We have to actually be taking care of ourselves and our situations in order to be prepared for times when they do get tough. And then a willingness to practice vulnerability. So vulnerability being the courage to show up and be who you are in all of our perfection and imperfections, to say what we need, to ask for what we need, and to do that in our relationships as much as possible. So when we were talking about these things, you know, this can get, it can get heavy and it can go in a lot of different directions. And we ask ourselves, do we need to have these difficult experiences to learn and grow as people and build resiliency and understand our meaning and our purpose? Is it necessary, or can we do it without pandemics and huge, you know, social injustice movements? I'd like to hear from the group what you think, if anyone wants to add.
I can chime in. This is Robin.
Thank you, Robin.
I think it's pretty spot on. I noticed just my own personal experience has been when I am uncomfortable, I find that I have the greatest growth and opportunity, even within challenge. So it doesn't make it seamless or easy, but I definitely am able to look back on those experiences and identify change and of course hindsight of what I could have done differently. But I'm usually in a better place once once the dust settles. I'm usually in a better place.
So going through it is really hard, and you might not totally identify or know what the meaning or purpose of that situation is, but afterwards you can have the insight to kind of grow and learn and take the takeaways.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And what this also reminded me of is just the natural tendency for the human condition to like the status quo and to kind of stay in this comfortable zone. And when we have challenging experiences, it forces us out of that in a way that maybe we wouldn't challenge ourselves, or we wouldn't rise to the challenge if that hadn't occurred. You know, I always point out when Ashley and I talked about this, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, you know, some people go through really, really challenging and traumatic experiences. And I'm always careful to point out that I don't think horrible things happen for a reason, but I do think that people take those experiences and really do incredible things with them. So I would never, you know, say that this harmful thing happened to this person or this child, you know, so that this could happen. But how beautiful that there are people who can take those experiences and really change the world with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did anyone else want to share?
I was going to say too, it's not always that you have to have difficult experiences, but I like to learn from other people's difficult experiences so that I don't have some of those same challenges. I mean, obviously difficult experiences are good because they make you problem solve a little more, or, you know, challenge you to think a little differently, how to solve some of those things. But like I said, a lot of people, sometimes it's really good to listen and learn from their difficult experiences, not actually have to go through it and experience it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting take on it. I've never really thought of it like that. And it really, I think, brings into light that kind of going back to the social support and authentic connection and solidarity is really listening to people and understanding other people's experiences not only benefits that person and provides a presence and a support that is hopefully helpful, but helps us learn and grow. So I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, anyone else before we move on? Nicole, are you there? I don't know if we've lost Nicole. Andrea, should I do something differently, or should I just continue with the slide?
Yeah, continue. I will try to contact Nicole to see what is going on. And I will try to help her. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so this is just an overview of the actual approaches we're going to talk about in terms of kind of managing chronic stress and dealing with situations like we've experienced. And you can see here, they kind of run the gamut. So expecting less from yourself, riding the emotional wave, non-binary thinking, both and, social, the tiny ritual, resiliency bank, radical acceptance, and then we'll finish with a chat about vulnerability and watch a little clip from Brene Brown's The Price of Invulnerability. Okay, so this is expect less and replenish more. This one is particularly hard for those of us who are, making big goals, striving towards them. I think most of us can relate to this, and it's part of being human, is wanting to achieve, wanting to be our best. And COVID has really brought into our awareness that we can't always strive for the same types of goals. And sometimes we have to be gentle on ourselves, and sometimes we have to expect less and accept that we're doing our best, even if it doesn't look the perfect way or the way that we wish it did. So this is made to be a little bit satirical, I guess, but I hope that people can relate to it, and you might want to think about, what it looks like in your life. So before COVID-19, we strive to be our best. During COVID-19, we give ourselves permission to fail more than we might typically, knowing that things are just so different. Holding yourself up to high standards, really practice being gentle on ourselves and watching when we start to have a really critical or negative self-view or even that of others. Exercising 4 times a week. I think that some of us being home, whatever our duties may be, it's harder to exercise. We don't have our typical routine, maybe with our gym or with our social groups that we would exercise with. So just once a week, is good. And you can kind of look at the rest of those. Yes, one person saying dance every day. Yes, so that's a good way, right, to deal with, like, okay, I can't go to the gym, what can I do? And maybe it doesn't look like 30 minutes on the treadmill, but it's still moving our body, and just accepting that this is the way it is now and it won't be this way forever. Yeah. Did anyone have any other questions or comments you want to add to this? Okay, I'll keep going. So the next one is riding the wave, feeling our feelings. So riding the wave of emotions. Nicole, do you want to switch to the next slide? If you can hear me, okay. So when we talked about the different emotions that we've experienced, all the way from the more uncomfortable, difficult emotions to the easier emotions to experience, or the more enjoyable emotions to experience, we wonder, how do I hold both? Can I be joyful and grateful at the same time that I feel sad and lonely? And this is a real skill. This is something to actively practice. And one thing that I work with my clients on, and something that I practice in my own life, is the practice of opening and saying yes in those moments where we might get really attached to that sadness or that despair, because it feels so real, and it is, and it's valid. But at the same time, it's so important, and we're seeing this time and time again through the research and through mental health studies, that looking at the other side of things, so feeling love, feeling grateful, feeling joy in the little moments that we can, even in the face of loneliness or despair, is really important. And so one way that you can do this is taking a moment to just experience all the emotions you're feeling in a safe place, not so that it overwhelms you, in a supportive place, and just saying, yes, I feel this way. Yes, I feel this way. And all of this is true for me. And the idea is to, rather than kind of restricting and hunkering down, which we tend to do from a mental health perspective of trying to protect ourselves, it's really a protective mechanism. We just allow ourselves at least once once a day or once a week to feel what we're feeling and say, okay, this is what is true for me right now. I saw a comment come in and I'm going to go down and look at that. So, yes. So, I want to say your name right. Dillman? Am I saying that right? I hope that I am. Oh, Demon or D?
D.
Okay, D.
D.
Okay.
D.
Sorry, thank you. So D said this is really hard when you don't have control over the emotional wave. Absolutely. Okay, I hear you, D. That's okay. No volume, no video. It's absolutely true. The lack of control and the perception that we don't have control over this emotional wave, and I hope we kind of captured that almost in that Adley show blurb, that it can be really disorienting. And so one thing that we can do, like I said, is just connect with what's true for us in the moment and say yes to that, even if we don't like it. It's amazing how powerful it can be to validate ourselves in that way, or to tell a friend or a therapist. Yeah. Okay. Yes, of course, Dee. Thank you. Okay, do you want to switch, Nicole? So on the same lines of, let's see, do you want to go back one? I think we missed radical acceptance. Yes, okay. So this goes along the same lines as saying yes. And many of you might be familiar with the idea of radical acceptance, but I'll just take a moment to describe it. Radical acceptance is really just looking at what the facts are of reality and saying, okay, this is what it is, and I accept this reality in this moment. What reality is not is approving of a situation, having compassion for maybe some wrongdoing to yourself or other people. It's not loving someone or something. It's not passivity, or it's not against change. It's essentially radical because you're accepting a situation that you don't really want to accept. And the idea behind radical acceptance is that it frees us from attaching to things that aren't in the moment, right? Well, I don't want it to be this way, so I'm gonna not accept the current situation and focus on how I want it to be. Well, that causes a lot of emotional discomfort for us. One way we can do this is by turning the mind. When we notice ourselves resisting and denying what the facts are in the moment, we turn our mind's eye to radical acceptance, to saying, okay, I accept what is in this moment. Does anyone have any questions about that or use that in their life? Feel free to chat, because I can read the chats, or to chime in. Okay. All right. Well, we could. Shay says, I have a sign in my home. It is what it is. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a powerful phrase. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, sometimes too, that's why a lot of businesses fail. They don't accept that things have changed, and then they don't adapt and change their business and their direction. And then by that time it's too late. They're in denial. And then by that time it's too late. They haven't adjusted to the situation to take actual action, or, and make decisions and things like that.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Karina. I think that it really kind of brings home that when we are really fighting reality, our viewpoint gets kind of small and we can get very rigid. And when we get rigid, it can be very hard in our thinking and in our behavior, even our emotions. It can be very hard to adapt to situations that are changing or that there's a lot of unknown. Dee said that I go with the flow of the wave, so I don't fight the current, which is the reality to me. Yeah, that's beautifully put. Thanks for that. Yeah. Okay. So practicing both. You can go to the next slide, Nicole, if that works. Yeah. So practicing both and thinking. So this is a non-binary way of thinking, opposed to either or. We're including both and the point between this one is really we tend to bump up into difficulty when we try to rationalize an irrational situation. I don't know if other people have experiences with the pandemic, but because there was so little known about COVID, whenever I tried to rationalize how to proceed, how to keep myself or my family or my friends safe, it was just so frustrating, right? Because there was no rational solution at that point. And so this is both and. The situation is crazy, not the person. The situation is pathological, not the person. Examples of this is terrible and many people are dying. And this is also a time for our families to come closer together. Another example is I'm highly competent and right now I'm flowing with the tide day to day. I think that's cool. That kind of goes with what Dee was just saying in terms of the current and the wave. Yeah. Anyone have any questions on that one? Okay, we can move to the next one. So intentional social connection. This is one of probably the most important slides, given what the pandemic has done to our social situations. And I know that one thing that's been so important in this pandemic is really kind of going with the flow. I think that's the theme for our presentation today, is kind of riding that wave and going with the tide of figuring out how we can be creative to create authentic, intentional connection. Nicole, is that you popping in?
I'm trying something new. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, we'll see how long it lasts.
Okay. Do you want to take it away on this slide? Or you want me to keep going?
Yeah. Well, really, I mean, one of the things that we really like to ask is for input on new or old activities that you've been able to utilize or get creative with in order to make intentional social connections during this time. If anyone would like to share ways that they've practiced this that have been helpful.
So for my family, it's been letter writing. We didn't really write a lot of letters, but now we're writing a lot of letters to our friends and family, even ones that live down the street. Sometimes we'll even mail them to them just to say that we really care and we're putting the effort out to connect with them in person, even if it's through a letter. I think I saw a chat where Andrea, you said Zoom parties. Yeah, I haven't tried that one, but I want to. Sounds fun.
I've done that with a couple of friends. And I think one of the important things to point out with the technology, since that is how we're having to stay connected, is, kind of the dichotomy that it is so important. It's in many ways our only way to connect with some family and friends. And yet it can also it can be counterproductive to our mental health as well. So trying to be very intentional about your boundaries with it. So social media can help some people stay connected and it can make other people feel really poorly. And that's just a question that you have to ask yourself. How do I feel when I've just spent 10 minutes scrolling through Facebook? Do I feel better or do I feel worse? And are there other intentional ways, that you can spend time doing this that are helpful to you, but always keeping in mind that, is this helpful or does it seem more hurtful for me? And in writing a letter and having those other, leaving a voice memo, that's one of my favorite ones instead of just a text. My friends and I might leave a voice memo, or we use an app called Marco Polo so we can actually see each other's faces and we can send a message to someone at any time and they can listen to it at any time that works with their schedule. And it's helpful to actually see their face and hear their voice sometimes than just to get the written message via text.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Shay's saying, I love Marco Polo. That's what her family uses. Um, and then Andrea was saying Netflix, watching Netflix online with family and friends. And Dee said our Lions Club writes letters to the seniors in the county who receive Meals on Wheels, so they get a letter with their meal, which is so awesome. There's something really important about that tangible connection, even if it's just written letter.
And I think that offers also that, you know, the double benefit of helping others and how that can help through this time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Remembering birthdays or special occasions. Karina said, yeah, that's an important one too, where we typically would be, going out to dinner or seeing these people for a party, or they'd be organizing a party. That's not happening, and people can feel kind of forgotten sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we've started doing Zoom birthday parties.
Cool.
I have
Yeah.
family in Wisconsin, I have family in Boston, family in San Diego, and we all get together and celebrate everybody's birthdays, which is great because we've never done that before. And so, all the nieces and the nephews and the aunts and the uncles and the grandparents, they're all going to get onto Zoom, and everybody gets to see everybody. I think I've had more contact with my family in the last 9 months than I had in the previous 15 years. Really?
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I had a student yesterday too at the food bank, and she turned 21 right during the pandemic. So that was real tough for them because they couldn't go out and celebrate.
Mm-hmm. This looks so different from person to person, the social connection. And some of us are exhausted socially because now all of a sudden we're in our homes with our children and our husbands, and everyone's working and going to school, and we're maybe saturated by it. And for someone who lives alone, it might be an especially lonely time.
Yeah. I've thought, actually, just one aside, I've thought a lot about what age range or developmental stage has been most impacted by the pandemic. And I think every developmental stage has been impacted, but certainly in my work, I'm seeing that 20 to 30-year-old, where social is such an essential part of development and mental health and connection. And then I'm seeing with, individuals who are elderly people who may live alone or whose families live out of town. It's been really, really hard on people. And so getting creative and having those Zoom meetings, sending those letters it can be a lifeline for someone. Yeah.
Well, and the neat aside, as far as learning through difficult situations, is we have hopefully a bunch of seniors that are getting techno savvy.
Yeah.
Right? That wouldn't have been before. So that's a whole outcropping that they probably wouldn't have changed the way they operated if it weren't for that, right?
Yeah, that's a good
I've
point.
seen connections where, schools take maybe a high schooler who's, very tech savvy and help pair them, maybe not in person, but in a way that helps support a senior, which is, a unique connection there to make, to help support that technology and teach them.
Yeah. I saw that someone raised their hand. Did someone want to speak? I think it was Stevens.
Yeah, we had some friends that they just moved into a new house, so they had everybody get together at a certain time, and then they actually had a party for them, a housewarming party. And at one point, the people that moved into the house, they actually took us with a laptop around the house, showing us everything. It was neat.
That's
neat.
awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
Definitely creative there.
Yeah. Okay, this is one of my favorite ones, Tiny Rituals and the Molecule of More, referring to the great dopamine neurotransmitter. So this quote, there are two ways the brain deals with the world: the future and things we need to go after, and the here and now, seeing things and touching things. So this is a dialect, essentially, is that our brain is geared towards making those goals and planning ahead, but without the present moment and our sensory experience in the now, it can be wearing on our mental health. And so finding the balance between those two things might be activating the dopamine, the molecule of more, in our reward system in our brain by setting realistic goals. And this kind of goes back to, you know, the expect less for this specific time, is that we may have had different goals prior to the pandemic, but now the tiny goals, even though they don't seem as fancy or amazing as maybe the bigger goals, they're still doing the same thing to our brain and activating that reward system, which elevates our mood. And then the art of the tiny ritual is a way that we can really tune into the present moment. And so whatever it is, for me, it's my coffee in the morning. It may be, you know, I don't know if people want to chime in or write in the chat, like, what's one thing during the day that you do pretty routinely, maybe every day, that you could sink a little bit deeper into and enjoy a little bit more by tuning into those sensory experiences and slowing down and really, really enjoying something that is a part of your day and is an important part of your routine, even if it's just your morning cup of coffee. Can anyone add to that? Does anything come to mind?
Mine for sure is to enjoy playing with my dog a little more. So now that I'm home, I can take her out frequently and throw the ball for her. So I can commit to diving into that a little deeper for sure.
Yeah.
I love that. I said that our animals are benefiting the most through this pandemic.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and animals are so wonderful for our mental health. And so to sink into that, you know, it's kind of a win-win. Dee said that I enjoy meditating in the morning, and that's a wonderful way to, you know, tune into our senses and just be in the moment and get ready to accomplish whatever goals we've made for the day or what's on our agenda. Yeah. Going for a walk, Stephen said. Yeah. Yeah, it's been really nice. You know, there's a lot we've lost not going into the office, so to speak, especially when it comes to social and ease of operations. But on the other hand, it's also created some space, some more space for those walks at lunch, or sitting outside in our front yard while we send emails. You know, those little things really add up for our mental health. Andrea, try new podcasts to learn something new every day. Yeah. Yeah. Podcasts are such an amazing way to just get so much information. And there's so many wonderful podcasts out there. Thanks for that, Andrea. So this next one is the bank of resiliency. And the idea is build it and it will come. So these are things that everyone knows. And certainly we're not saying do all of these. It's the only way to build resiliency. But the important part of this idea is that it's the wave, right? I'll go back to that theme for today. We are going to ride these waves throughout our whole lives. And sometimes it'll be harder than other times. And when it is harder, we want to have this foundation of resiliency. And the way that we can do that is when there is more space in our routine, or we have, when things are less difficult, we can kind of focus on, okay, you know, how can I eat well for my body and what makes me feel good? What helps me feel mentally and physically and spiritually well, if you believe in that, in terms of, you know, what can I create for myself that when things get hard, I have something to fall back on, or I'm well rested, or I feel healthy to deal with a difficult situation. Yeah, and the last one is gratitude practice, and that one is really important and has been really just been shown to have such a huge effect on our mental health. No matter what, we can usually identify at least one thing that we're grateful for, and it's almost like a magic pill in a way, that being grateful changes our perspective and gets us out of that more rigid, constricted perspectives, and allows us to not only see the other side of things, but be better problem solvers and identify ways that we can lessen the load if we're feeling overwhelmed. Does anyone want to add to this or have any comments? Okay, this last slide is the practice of vulnerability. It's the courage to be imperfect, compassion to be kind to ourselves and others, even when it feels uncomfortable, to be authentic, to authenticity, to be who we are, to show up essentially. It's the idea of showing up and saying, all right, this is me, or even when we do things that we're not that proud of, saying, okay, I hear you, I see you, you know, and I take responsibility for that. And that's really a vulnerable thing to do. If there's some risk in it, when we allow ourselves to be more open. And at the same time, when we don't allow ourselves to be open and we try to be perfect, and certainly I'm guilty of that, you know, and not be compassionate to ourselves and others, we miss out on a lot. And Brene Brown speaks to this in this TED Talk, The Price of Invulnerability, and we're going to just watch a few minutes of it.
Homeschool your children unless you can send them to school because you are
evidence of the numbing. We are the most addicted. We are the most medicated. We're numbing. And this doesn't even include busyness. I didn't even put the busy slide up. You know, when they start having busy recovery meetings, they'll have to, busy 12-step meetings, they'll have to rent out football stadiums because we just stay so busy that the truth of our lives can't catch up. That's the plan. And so what are the consequences of numbing vulnerability? What are the consequences of trying to beat vulnerability to the punch? Here's the consequence to numbing that I've learned. And as a vulnerability researcher, I've spent the first 6 years of my research studying shame, empathy, and courage, and the last 4 years studying joy, authenticity, love, and belonging. And one of the things that I learned that was very startling for me personally and everyone I've ever met is that you cannot selectively numb emotion. When we numb the dark emotion, when we numb vulnerability and fear and shame of not being good enough, we by default numb joy. We cannot selectively just numb the dark emotions. We have interesting research around this. We have research that shows us in addiction studies that an intensely positive experience is as likely to trigger relapse as an intensely negative experience. Let me tell you, if vulnerability is a sharp edge, there may be nothing sharper than joy. To let yourself soften into loving someone, to caring about something passionately, that's vulnerable. So the question becomes, how do we embrace vulnerability? And here's what I learned from the research. We practice gratitude. We stop and be thankful for what we have. I've interviewed a lot of people who have been through many horrific things, from genocide to trauma. And when you ask them, what they need. They will tell you, I don't need your pity. I don't need your sympathy. I need, when you look at your children, I need to know you're grateful. I need to know that you know what you have. So to practice gratitude, to honor what's ordinary about our lives, because that is what's truly extraordinary. We can compete with the images from the media, from the news, from the scary shows on TV, with our own images of gratitude about what's ordinary in our lives, the people we love, our kids, our family, play, our community, and nature. These are things that happen every single day that we're so busy being afraid we're missing these.
Yeah. So any thoughts on that clip? I think it's a powerful clip. Anyone want to comment?
So I thought it was interesting that they said joy can trigger just as easily as a negative trigger. That was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, knowing some of Brene Brown's research, just when we feel joy or when we feel shame, for example, both of those emotions are vulnerable for different reasons, right? When we're joy, we're so afraid we're going to lose it. We just want to hold on to it. We don't want it to ever go away. When we feel shame, we might feel very exposed and not okay. And those intense emotions, you know, without our ability to connect and cope with those and to sink into those experiences in ways that feel safe for us, it can be dysregulating at times. Yeah. Stevens, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's true sometimes. I mean, just the simple act of saying thank you or you're welcome, it can really mean a lot. It can really change your opinion of someone, your I mean, the way you view them and everything. It just even the way it makes you feel, it just it's such a little thing, but it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And in a way, when you say thank you, it is vulnerability. It is being vulnerable to some extent, because you're saying, you know, thank you for that. That was important to me. And it exposes a part of you, you know, in a way where you're saying, you know, this is me, you're seeing part of me and I really appreciate you. And some people hesitate to put themselves out even through a thank you because they don't want to lose it or they don't want it to go away. Or just being close to others is a little bit scary. So I can really relate to what you're saying. Yeah. Is there anything else? That's the end of the presentation. Is there anything else that came up for you or that you still have questions about?
So I think this was good. I really appreciate it.
I want to say thank you for giving us a handful of people to talk to today. It's not just Ashley and I on here, and I've really enjoyed the input.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so
Yeah.
much for doing it. Just kind of put my mind in perspective, especially as we're reaching the holidays and maybe getting away from our normal routines and kind of just, keeping our mind positive, especially during the holidays where our normal traditions aren't always fully there. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Thanks, April, for
Yeah.
specifically for bringing that up about the holidays.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't mention it, and you're so right.
Mhm.
Is that especially now with the holidays and with this new stay-at-home order,
Mhm.
and many of us are tired and we're worn down after all these ups and downs, and we're missing family or whatever it is. And the holidays can bring this sense of normalcy, or we have our traditions, and when those look differently this year, if they do, it can really impact us. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah.
I mean, it is just nice to really just, okay, I got that. And just hearing this information just refreshes it that like, you know, of being and staying positive and doing just reminders of some things that we could do in order to keep that going through the last bit. Yeah.
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 Cool.
Thank you.
One of our goals moving into the spring semester, realizing, I think one of the themes that we've heard from students, and if there's any students here that want to share, you know, or give us further input, but you know, even mental health therapy, which is available to you through the Student Health Center as a student, is a commitment, and sometimes to some degree, and sometimes even though a student knows that maybe they would benefit from it and they're interested, it's just it's one more thing they have to do, they feel like, every week, or committing to something long-term is difficult to do right now. So one of the things that we're bringing to our students more often next semester is the option for popping in for short workshops like this, or even if it's not a facilitated presentation, but just an open kind of forum for students with, you know, guided by a therapist to have a space to just check in and talk and maybe learn, you know, one thing that could help their mental health right now. So stay tuned, and if you're not currently on our VIP list where you get our newsletters, just email us at the Student Health Center, and you can be added on. Or also, I encourage you, if you're not already, to like us on Facebook and Instagram. Andrea, is that Student Health Center, right?
Yes, Cuesta Health Center.
Cuesta Health Center, thank you. Because, you know, we really push out a lot of health information through our social media right now as a way to connect, but also any events that we put on, we will advertise. So it's a really good way to stay connected with what's going on in your health center.
Are you still taking photograph entries?
That ended Monday, right, Andrea?
No, today.
Today.
We extend until today at midnight. So
Okay.
you have some hours left.
Thank you for bringing that up, Hunter. For those of you who are not familiar, it is on our website if you want to look it up right now. But we are offering a photography contest. Andrea, do you want to, I'll let you chime in more on the details with that.
Yeah, the last year we started with this contest. This is the Cuesta Campus Well photography contest, Emotions Through the Lens. So this is a contest open for our students, faculty, and staff. And the topics are: how do you stay healthy during the pandemic? How do you keep your mental health strong during this challenging time? Being apart does not mean we are alone, and strong social networks boost our physical and mental health. So anything you want to say using the photography, using pictures, is more than welcome. This is another way to communicate our feelings or even our ideas to stay strong during this time. So everyone is welcome to participate, and please help us to spread the word. I mean, it's still today, but we're still having some time.
And we are having you know, there is a reward, not a reward, what am I looking for? But it's a contest. So we do have
Prize.
and it is
Treat
open to
yourself.
staff and students, and those are separate. Student and staffs are separate categories. So we will award prizes to staff and students that submit.
Yeah,
And can we see the gallery? Andrea, is there a way to view the gallery of those, the submissions? Okay.
Yeah, well, we have a gallery. The last year we have like a physical gallery, of course, that we were able to see it face to face. But this year, this next year, when we have all the pictures, we will have an online gallery. So as soon as it's ready, I will share the link with all of our community.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Quick question too. Are you planning again in the spring to do the group therapy thing that you had? It was like the 6-week thing this last time. I had some students that were interested, but it got kind of late, or can they jump in, or are you planning to do that again or something similar?
Yeah, so we're open for the discussion with it. We're always open for group therapy. It's most beneficial when you do get, you know, a good solid group of the same students, and a lot of the reason we needed students to commit to the full 6 weeks was, so that people feel safe. It's difficult when
Right.
you don't know someone, all of a sudden opening up, and it is therapy.
Ah,
So in order to
yes.
create kind of a safe space for the students that choose to participate, that group therapy is generally a closed group. But
Okay.
if we can get participation in that, we're always welcome to facilitate more group sessions. But I think in addition to that, what we really want to look at is, whether it's a lunch with the therapist, coffee with the therapist, but a brief interaction where someone can just log on. There's not a long-term commitment like the group therapy. Not that that's long-term, but short-term, long-term.
Right.
There's not the same commitment to being there every week, but yet if it works with their schedule that week, or if there's a topic that is of special interest to them, they feel like they can pop in, they can interact with some peers and with a therapist, and maybe the next week it doesn't work, and that's okay.
Okay, yeah, interested in any of those kinds of things we can help promote too, because I know people are interested.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. I'm really excited about doing some of those more open forum, like group sessions, like a coffee with a therapist type of thing, just to create that space for people, and so that it isn't a commitment, but then they still have, the attention of a therapist, and then the cohesiveness and camaraderie of the group, even if it's just for one session. I think it would be really cool.
Yeah, and sometimes that can be the bridge. Our hope would be if a student feels they could benefit from therapy, it could be the bridge to them seeking that service out as well. So, well, thank you, everyone. I know we're on time and target, and if anyone else has anything they'd like to share, we'll stay on for a couple minutes here, Ashley and Andrea and I. So feel free to stay on and chat, but this does conclude the end of our workshop, and thank you for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone.
And actually too, before I leave real quick, how long are you seeing students next week at all, or when's your last?
Good question. So for one-to-one therapy, we have open appointments for students who are currently in therapy and closing up. So the therapists are really trying to work with their current clients and close that up. We will start new clients or new students next semester. Really the reason behind that too is that we close in between the faculty
Right, exactly.
that time. So we wouldn't want to open a student up to a process that might, and then not be available for a month to them.
Buy over the holidays. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, okay, you just exposed all these vulnerable things. We'll see you in a month and a half.
Right, yeah.
So to avoid that type of situation, we will start taking new clients, but we always take referrals up until the last day, because we will help connect them with a community resource if there's an immediate need before we return in spring. We can still help connect them to someone who is open over the break. So we can make that connection for them all the time. And then certainly come spring. So what is that, January 4th?
I say, when are you guys back? Are you?
So the therapists come back when school resumes.
When school actually starts. Okay, so that Tuesday, whatever it is, 22nd or something. Okay.
And we'll have staff available to book appointments right away and go through.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Karina, for all your
Awesome.
participation.
Yeah, no, we
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. This was good.
Yeah, and for helping us to promote all our strategies. I know you're pretty
that's
active.
great.
You are an ally.
Awesome. Well, have a great week, you guys.
Bye, Karina. Thank you.
Bye. Dee, are you still on there? Do you want to send us a message or? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it was great. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
It's good. We have a variety, I saw, and we have a variety between students, faculty, and some staff as well. I was thinking like, oh, maybe we should be opening this just for students, but then I was like, no, I think faculty and staff is really interested to, I mean, just because after supporting all this semester, the students, I think like they need to recharge energy as well, like
Yeah.
to feel connected to.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like when you want to support others, you need to start supporting yourself also.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm glad they
The
came.
oxygen, the plane and the oxygen analogy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, we didn't bring that one up, but
Yeah, you've got to put the oxygen on yourself first before you're ready to provide, to help others. And that just brings up also the challenges I know that therapists have been under during this time with having to hear day in and day out about other people
I know.
experiences as they're also having their own. So
Yeah, and also as a strategy, like for marketing, I saw some of the, especially for example, D and Cotting, that they are always super connected with our activities. So it's good they are coming here, have their experience by themselves and say, oh, this could be helpful for my students because they see a lot of students all the time. They
and
work for the
with some
council.
really vulnerable students too.
Exactly, they work for cafe and counseling, so it's like the perfect allies to continue inviting to this kind of activities and workshops. So I'm glad that they came to see what was going on.
yeah.
Yeah, cafe stands, I don't know if you know, Ashley, the cafe stands for CalWorks, EOP, CalWorks Foster Youth, EOPS. So your foster youth that are in school, students who are in CalWorks and back into school. So many, a lot of your single parents that are trying to balance, parenting and school and have, typically, might have financial challenges.
Yeah.
That is the work. They work they work directly with that group of students.
D does.
D is, yes, she is.
She works for
she is
cafe.
part of that, as well as Hunter, Julianne,
Okay.
Karina as well, I believe, right? Yeah. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so they're a cool, they're like a key strategy. The library has been really working really. Andrea's done, I have to say, a remarkable job with really helping connect our service with other departments and help keep them connected, because really that's ultimately the goal. I mean, you're never going to have enough therapists and nurses and staff to provide for 10,000 students, but you want to be able to create these spaces throughout the campus and people that can help make those connections and be there.
Right.
So yeah, so that's always been one of her key strategies and something that I think that you've done a really good job with. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrea. It makes a huge difference.
Thank you. Yeah, and the good thing is like every time the students come back to me or to our allies, they always feel like comfortable with our therapists and nurses. So that is really important, that they feel comfortable, they feel the confidence to go back and even to share the services to other students. Because even when we do a lot to promote our services, every time we see like a new student, they come here asking like, oh, I didn't know we have this for free, or we didn't know we have therapy, or they didn't even know the health center exists. So yeah, I always tell Nicole that this is definitely a teamwork, because it doesn't make sense if I start like promoting the programs and then the students that they don't feel comfortable like participating or coming to see our team.
Yeah,
that won't be the same. So thank you for your time to be here today.
All right, I have a 2:30 appointment.
Yeah,
Nicole is all good. Well, that was kind of stressful.
Gonna take a water break or a bathroom break?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the bathroom, but But I'm glad it worked out for you to come back on with your audio.
That was
Just
the
on
weird
time.
thing. I could always hear you guys, so I had no idea. Like I could hear you guys perfectly. You just couldn't hear me at times. And there was no prompt on my end to know you couldn't hear me without you guys telling me. So it was, but what I eventually did was turn my headphones off. And I would have done that sooner, but Zoom does not, I've had this before. Zoom does not just switch over to like your default speaker if you turn headphones off.
you had
And when
to
I'm in the
manually change
PowerPoint
it.
mode, I can't go into the settings. So I was afraid to do that, even though I figured that would solve the issue. Anyways, it all worked out in the end. I knew you knew the presentation, and at the very least, I would just keep scrolling. The other challenging thing that I need to figure out is the arrow buttons don't work